In 2018, a Baltimore police officer was found guilty of fabricating evidence in a case where his own body camera captured the act. During his trial, the officer said that he had intentionally recorded the body camera video to serve as a recreation of a discovery that he made of drugs in a parking lot. He said he recreated the video for documentation purposes, but the judge, during his hearing, did not accept that as an explanation and said that he had created the video to deceive. During the investigation, the officer kept trying to point out that he was just recreating a legitimate discovery of heroin that he had found. However, he and the judge and the jury knew that he had broken a law and would have to face the consequences. Knowledge question found from this real-life event. And that is, do the ends justify the means? When discussing if the ends justify the means through an ethical lens, one can see that the ends do not justify the means. Ethically, if you go about doing something in a wrong way to try to get the right result, you are still at fault in doing so, even if you got what you wanted. As ethics refer to right and wrong from a source that is not oneself, you must abide by society's rules to be ethical. For this question to be answered from an ethical viewpoint, one must recognize the similarities of the deontological ideology. Deontology states that morality of an action should be based on whether that action itself is right or wrong under a series of rules, rather than based on the consequences of the action. For example, if you were to cheat on a test and get an A, the ends would not justify the means, because what you did was against the rules of the school. It is ethically wrong even if your morals allow you to carry out this act. While most of the time, the ends do not justify the means, there are exceptions to the rules. If a police officer can use trickery to get a convict to admit their guilt, it isn't ethically right to use trickery on another person, but for this example, it was to put a criminal behind bars, which justifies the officer's use of tricks to get that confession. However, in doing so, they must not use their power to force a confession out of a non-guilty party, such as in the case of the Central Park Five. These young teen boys were scared so badly by police and weren't allowed to talk to their parents that they admitted to a crime they didn't commit and spent many years in jail before they were absolved of the charges. While there are some exceptions, they are few and sparse, and most of the time when you're looking at it from an ethical standpoint, the ends do not justify the means. When discussing if the ends justify the means in relation to emotion, one can see that the ends do justify the means. This discussion is based upon morals rather than ethics. Emotions are had by individuals, which brings morality into the spotlight. Someone will justify their actions to get the result by using emotion as a cause. As morals are more about what an individual thinks is okay for themselves to do, they must only justify it for themselves. This has a striking resemblance with consequentialism, which states, the doctrine that the morality of an action is to be judged solely by its consequences. Consequentialism firmly states that only the end result matters, no matter how you get there. Once again, let's look at cheating on a test as an example. Looking at it through an emotional lens, someone might justify cheating and getting an A with the fact that they would have been sad, or that their parents would get mad. While it may be ethically wrong, they can find ways to make it morally okay for themselves because of the way they would perceive a bad grade emotionally. When discussing consequentialism paired with emotion, they will say that the end result was a good grade, therefore it was okay for them to cheat. They may believe that cheating is okay. However, if they were found to be cheating, it would result in a 0%, which is worse than the score they would have gotten if they took the test themselves. This would make them feel regret and sadness, knowing that what they did was wrong but hadn't accepted it because they were trying to make themselves feel the best they could without actually factoring in if it was truly right or wrong. Many people use emotion to justify their actions, as they believe that whatever the consequences to their actions is more important than their actions, showing that consequentialism is strongly worked off of emotion and morality. Moving on to the conclusions that can be drawn from this presentation. You can see how it is a hotly debated subject, dependent on what set of principles a person sees as more important, whether it's ethics or morals, ultimately leads to the answer they would have to the posed question. While most people would argue that the ends don't justify the means, and while I see this as the truth as well, you will never have a complete consensus. When looking at it between consequentialism and deontology, the, quote, normal, end quote, way to look at things is through the deontological set of values. Deontology is the more trusted ideology because it is set up by a committee or a group of people, so it is seen as more trusted as the right way to behave. To follow deontology, you must have trust in the ethical setup in our lives and strive to live by them. In regards to the real-life situation, the officer was charged by the judge and given a 3-year suspension. Although he may have thought it was morally okay to commit this act, he knew that it was against the law, and knew that if he was caught, he would face punishment. In this real-life situation, the ends did not justify the means, because he was punished severely for his actions. A new real-life situation in relation to the question posed at the beginning is nurses and doctors not listening to a signed DNR. DNR stands for Do Not Resuscitate. There was a woman named Beatrice Wiseman who had suffered a terrible stroke. After spending weeks in the hospital, she let her husband make the decision for her, as she could no longer make medical decisions for herself. After a long talk between the husband and their children, he decided to sign a DNR for his dying wife. However, when the hospital workers saw that she was dying, they broke her ribs, collapsed her lungs, and revived her, going against what she had directly said she wanted. These nurses and doctors decided to ignore the DNR and keep her alive despite her wishes being spelled out on a piece of paper. Now, the husband, the wife, and their family is suing the hospital for the emotional trauma and the ultimate ignoral of the wishes of this dying woman. They broke the law that they knew about, doing what they thought was morally right, not taking into effect that it wasn't ethically right. When looking back at the question posed, there's 2 ways to look at the outcome. If you look at it from the view of deontology, they should have let the woman die. This is because they acted on their morals and didn't act ethically. Because if they had acted ethically, they would have realized that death is what she wanted, and what she was supposed to get legally. Now, if you look at it from a consequentialist view, you would only look at the fact that the woman had been saved, and the fact that the family will still have her in their lives. It only focuses on the end result, and not on the fact that they broke the law and went against her wishes to save this woman. They would also see it as making her life last and enriching the lives of her family, as consequentialism is based on whatever brings to most people happiness or betters their lives.